Greetings and salutations. Hello to everyone there. If you guys can hear me and see me, give me the prayer sign. There we go. I I was just seeing if you guys could hear me and see me. Thumbs up, prayer signs, whatever. Gotcha. All right. Man, I've had a busy morning. I literally just got back from the the county dump. I had to take a load of trailer load full of stuff over there and get that all offloaded and come back, shower because I was completely covered in dirt and sweat. And so thanks for everybody hanging out and waiting on me. It's a couple minutes late. Yeah. Hello to everyone. It's gone way too far on here. I see my mom's on here. Hey, mom. Coco, Sarah. Hey, Sarah. Diane. Diane, I emailed you back. I think I responded back to you on the website. So you might want to check that if you hadn't already. Shamrock. Kathy B, Chris H, Beverly Young, Joel 62, Angel, Linda Stilley, Daniel Young. I saw Dan Lockhart was on here. Pamela Minnick, Pam Cardinal, Deanna Calloway. Await him. Well, hello and hello. It's good to be here with you guys. Um, so the rumor is true. I will be going back to the hotel life for just a couple months this time. It won't be as long as last time, which means that my Monday live will be at night instead of during the day. So next Monday, I should be at nighttime. And from there on, Monday nights will be my Monday night live again. Bubba and his hotel life. Yeah. From what I understand, the internet's a lot better where I'm going. So um, should be able to continue to do the live streams with no issues. Fingers crossed, right? Sweet Tea and Prophecy. Hey, Joel, see you. Elijah Lee, Trace Severs from Colorado, the battleground state of Colorado. And I mean battleground in the sense of Venezuelans versus everybody else there, I guess. Peach, how are you, Peach? Allison's, John Freilich. Dude, man, if I can make it to Midway Airport, Chicago, I'll totally take you up on that. B-Ball Man from Nova Scotia. Kathleen McKeithen. There you go. Donegal, Tom L., Sandy Siegel, Judy Thomas, Essie Bach, Essie Grandmother, Jackie Borowski, Jan McGrath, AEC. Man, it has been just a busy, busy week. So yesterday we had Titus's birthday. We celebrated his birthday at a place called Urban Air, which is like a big bounce house place. And so that was a lot of fun. Just hanging out there and watching the kids have fun and put his ninja skills to the test. So Um, I have a joke for you guys, a dad joke. Let's see if anybody gets it. What is blue and not very heavy? See if anybody gets this one. It's not wind. It's harp. No. There you go. Sweet tea and frosty, light blue. Oh, I love that joke. All right. So I finished the Mandela Effect. I have another short story that I'll be working on. I'm gonna hold off on that just for a little bit. Called Ghost Towns, I think. I think that's gonna be the title. Um, Anyways, the goal with all these short stories is eventually I will put them all into a book mixed in with articles and artwork and all that kind of stuff and kind of make that a package thing. Uh, so if you come across spelling errors or plot holes that are the size of the Grand Canyon, don't worry. They will go back through the editing process and I'll clean them up real nice. Um, the Kamala effect. Oh man, that's like a sucking vortex black hole, destroys everything. Uh, I have so I'm almost done with, well, not almost done. I'm about halfway done with my Revelation series. I'm doing the whole PowerPoint graphics, extended notes on it. And it's different from what I was trying to do before. I think before I was just reading through the chapter and talking through some points, and then I would put that video up. And I think what this will be uh, probably one long video, and it'll be broken up into sections. And then that whole video, I'm gonna try and I gotta figure out what my parameters are for how much I can upload to and stuff. I might have to break it up into smaller sections, but it'll have the graphics this time, and a lot more detail. I think last time the videos were meant to only, to go through it pretty quickly, like 10 minutes per chapter was the goal. This one is gonna be much more in depth, but I wanna do, and I'm debating on how to do this. I can do this as a live stream, and if I do it as a live stream, uh, it'll have to be multiple nights a week because, Revelation is 22 chapters. It's so much detail in there. I mean, it would at a minimum be 22 live sessions. There are probably there might be one or two chapters I could probably combine together, but I probably will keep them separate for that purpose. So I need to figure out what time works, and it's not going to work for everybody. I get it, but I'm going to upload those videos to the I'll create a separate playlist for them, just be on that playlist, and then I'm going to also copy those videos on Rumble, so they'll be on both YouTube and Rumble, and probably link back to the website as well. So I am really excited. The artwork turned out really amazing. I think the way I'm going to do it will work out a lot better for folks, than simply just reading through it. And there'll be a lot of charts and a lot of things in there, visuals for people to kind of get their minds wrapped around different things. Anyways, I'm more to follow on that, but depending on when I go to Arkansas, and I'll be up in Northwest Arkansas. So if you're in the area there, let me know. Um, I will. I'll probably just start finding a good time in the evening to do it, aside from Monday nights, or I might start it on a Monday night. I don't know, but basically, it'll just go through and we'll start knocking out the whole book of Revelation. And anyway, so that's what I'm really kind of been throwing myself into once I finish the last short story. Anyways, so Ghost Town, I'll probably get into that or start writing that in October at some point. But I do have a couple of confabs with Lee Mondo, L.A. Marzulli, um, we are going to talk through the occult and all that stuff and how that has impacted modern America. And that will be probably filmed at the end of this month, pre-recorded, and then I'll publish that in October at some point. But okay, so that's pretty much the news for me. I don't have any interviews coming up right now, guest appearances or anything, which is nice because it's so much stuff is in flux. Trying to find my way around. Um, I tend to forget things, and I'll put them down on the calendar, and I'll still forget them. But okay. So this week, as I mentioned earlier, was super busy for me. Got one kid home today, sick. Ellis got the same crud I had last week, the flu or whatever. And so the flu hit me last Tuesday. I started to feel it, I guess, Sunday, and then Monday. I thought, well, it felt maybe like a head cold, and then Tuesday it hit me all over. And then Tuesday through Friday, I was pretty much just miserable. And by Friday, I got a Z pack and once you start taking the steroids and stuff, I mean, that boosts your energy and all that stuff up. So, uh, my wife and I'd got a hold of a friend's trailer, and we just cleaned out the entire garage. It, it looks amazing right now. So, that's what I was taking that load today because they were closed yesterday. So I had to piled up high and just take that over there and get rid of that. And while I was there, um, they have this big machine that you pull the trailer up, drop the loading ramp down, and you just start sliding stuff into this like big compactor. And I mean, we put in a nightstand. I mean, a solid wood nightstand, and that thing just crushed it. And I'm watching this machine crushing things, and I'm just thinking like, this is what's coming. And I know it's a silly analogy maybe, but there is a time of crushing that is going to come upon this world very quickly. And unless you're taken off the trailer early and you're out of there, you're going to go through this intense period of time of destruction and chaos. And I think for me, one of the I don't call myself a watchman in the um, any normal sense of the word. Like, I think what I do is a watchman type duties, but I don't ever call myself like my handle is not Watchman Pete, or anything like that. And I'm not like I in the debate. I think that there's a definitely a New Testament um, calling for us to be watchful and watching, um, because I think what's coming is it's going to be such a terrible time of death and judgment and chaos and destruction. um it's going to creep up on people before they know it, just like this week had. So here I am all this week running around doing stuff and worried about the party and then making sure the party went well. And then Rochelle stayed home with Ella because she was sick, and so I'm there with this party with all these people and kids and stuff by myself. And it just dawned on me that uh, Wednesday is the 11th, September the 11th. And, I thought back, okay, well, it's been 22 years. So this is coming up on the 23rd anniversary since 9/11, and how much the world has changed in just these short 22 years since this has happened. And I started to think about, okay, what were all the major changes? I know we talk about from time to time. Um, and I went in and listed them out. And I wrote it down this way, like, what good has the post 9/11 world brought us? And number one was that we entered into this war on terror that we had apparently no desire to win. And number two was that we declared war on terror, which is it's a terror is not a group, it's not an army, it's not a nation, it's a, it's a thing. It's something that can be anything. Um, if I'm in the woods and a bear's chasing me, a bear is incredible. That's going to be terror for me. Or if I'm in a dark alley in the middle of the city and some thugs are coming up and it's shadowy and things don't look right and my spidey senses are tingling, there's a sense of terror there too. So terror can come in many forms. And when you declare war on terror, much in the same way that we declared war on poverty or war on drugs, you're pretty much going to lose that war because you've not identified who the enemy is. You're identifying what the enemy does or some aspect of what the enemy's capabilities are, but you're not actually addressing an enemy that can be defeated. Jesus said that the poor would be with us always. And for the United States back in the 1960s under LBJ to go and say, we're going to declare war on poverty. And then what they did is they systematized poverty and then they basically recreated the entire southern plantation structure and put them inside of the major urban areas and then enslave people to these systems where they would be generationally poor uh, and entrenched in poverty to the extent that there was no escape, very little, hope for escape. And we called that progress. But now it's been so ingrained into our society that people don't want to be released from it. And that's why, primarily the minority communities keep voting the same direction, even though their circumstances never get better. Well, that seems to be changing. That tide is turning now with Trump's reelection campaign and all that. I think people are beginning to open their eyes and see that the insane amount of persecution that is directed against one man through lawfare, through these phony congressional investigations, the Russia hoax, and all that kind of stuff. Uh, I think it's drawn him a lot of sympathy from the minority community who's been on the receiving end of an unfair system, right? Well, just as the minority communities that had intrinsically been Democrat for so many decades now are beginning to move out of that camp and move into the other camp, the MAGA camp, the Trump camp. The establishment in charge decided, well, we're losing our base. We need to bring in a whole new voting block that will guarantee us power for the next 40 years or the next, however many years they're looking at. And hence we've had this open borders uh, crisis for the last, 10 years or so. And there's been no real desire to fix that until, or even address it as an issue until Trump came along in 2016. And so we also live in this time now of this paradox. I don't know how to describe it any other way. On one hand, you have your borders are open. You can come across, you can traffic humans, drugs, whatever, terrorists. People are coming in from all over the world through these porous borders that the Democrats are vehemently opposed to closing off. But then you go and you get on a plane to go fly somewhere and you're getting strip searched, you're getting prodded and you're x-rayed and you're having to stand there with your hands over your head, like you're guilty. And, basically they're looking inside your body to see if you're hiding anything. And it just, you can't bring more than like this much water or liquid with you it doesn't make any sense. On certain parts of the control of society, it is completely Orwellian. And then on the other side, it's like we don't care at all. On one hand, they want everybody to take these vaccines to make everybody safe, but then they've got people coming in from third world countries that are bringing back diseases that have been long since extinct in the United States. Uh, and now they're becoming a factor again because we're not vetting anybody coming across. We're not doing any of these health screenings or any of that stuff. So think it's like we live in this world where nothing makes sense anymore. And I think of that much as like the way the post 9/11 world's become. With that, we've had the dawn of the surveillance state, with the introduction of the Patriot Act and PRISM and warrantless wiretaps, and all of the other trappings that have come in inside through Patriot Act. Um, it just seems like this world is increasingly getting smaller, and there's nowhere to run. And I think that's the design of it. I mean, ultimately, we know that the world of the Revelation 13, that's the way the world's going to become. There's not going to be anywhere to hide. And for my post-tribulation friends who believe they're going to um, be able to weather the storm in their bunkers and their generators and their beanie weenies and AR-15s and all the stuff that they've got accumulating now, they're not going to be able to survive the storm that's coming. And I can tell you from just a military aspect, the technologies that we had even when I got out in 2020 were terrifying. I mean, I'm sure it's probably leapfrogged by now many times over. And it just, it gives me pause to, I do the thing like the debate in good faith, and I'm sure Bruce was in good faith as well. But the reality is, regardless of our opinions and regardless of our differences, hermeneutic wise, this is coming, and there's not anything that he or I can do to stop this, regardless of whether we agree or don't agree with it, or whatever we think about it. It's coming. The storm is coming, and you're not going to be able to escape from it unless there is one escape. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Point number 4, because of the aforementioned 3 things, you've had the war on terror, which dragged on for 20 years at the cost of $8 trillion. We've had 4,431 U.S. Service members killed in action, 31,000, almost 32,000 wounded in action for Iraq, 2,354 KIA for uh, Afghanistan, and then another 20,149 wounded in action. And these are people with like missing limbs, PTSD, severe mental trauma, missing body parts. I mean, bullet holes, scars, all of that. Things that people are going to have to live with for the rest of their life. And I have a friend of mine who was one of my crew chiefs who, at the time when I was in command, he wanted to come over into our company. And he was a good guy. And I fought really hard to get him over. And I finally got him into the unit, and he deployed with the unit as I was changing out of command. And he was just working on an aircraft one day on the flight line, and a mortar hit not too close to, or not too far from the aircraft, and it just blasted him, through him. Like we watch an action movie, where guys running and an explosion happens and it kind of throws you. Yeah, it did throws you, and it threw him into the aircraft. And so he had to medically retire. I mean, he's got all his body parts and stuff like that, but uh, just something like that happening. Um, it makes me It makes me shudder to think how much human life we've wasted over there for what? We got out of Iraq in 2011, just, tucked tailed and ran, under the Obama administration, and then again under the Biden administration 10 years later in 21, we tucked tailed and run out of Afghanistan. I mean, people hanging off the planes, trying to leave that country, uh, and the way that we did it was just absolutely ridiculous. That was the worst exit plan. That was worse than, when we left Vietnam by far. And, the most embarrassing, military operation in probably US history that I can think of. I'm trying to rack my brains to think of something more embarrassing. Maybe, um, who was the guy that got, the US cavalry guy that charged and tried to take on all those Indians and ended up getting everybody massacred? Um Wild Bill, no, not Wild Bill Hickok. Custer, thank you. That those probably are equal to each other. in terms of just sheer, incompetence and stupidity and just yeah, Bay of Pigs too. Um, but yeah, $8 trillion we waste on those wars for what? To achieve what? But with all that, with the rise of the surveillance state, with the rise of this endless wars, open borders, the Orwellian or dystopian, travel procedures now and health mandates, and we had the obvious rise would be the rise of populism, that people would rise up and say, "This is insane, we don't wanna do this." And who comes forth as a champion of populism is a guy named Donald Trump. And then the state government, I mean, the federal government, the deep state, the shadow government, whatever you wanna call them, the corporate oligarchies, all of them turn their ire against this guy who now has been going under the knife, so to speak, for the last 9 years to the point of having almost a successful assassination attempt on him. And now we're coming up on this other inflection time here where the nation's about to make a decision. And I feel like this is, I want to show this again because I think it's important, but we're at this inflection point where it almost feels like the unstoppable force meets the immovable object kind of point. This is the election logic tree I did for the article The Last Election, which is still on the website. And, I'm not predicting any one way or the other. I'm just showing where these inflection points happen. Do we have an election? That's the first one, right? Yes or no? No, then it's going to be one of those three things, number one, two, or four. So either an economic collapse, a major terror cyber attack, or maybe both, or some type of World War III scenario or pandemic. And I said if it's going to be a pandemic, they would have to roll it out here in September to give it time for them to get all of their machinations in place to steal the election or try to steal the election. Excuse me. Yeah. Let's say Trump wins, or let's say we do have the election and Trump wins, or let's say he loses. Again, you're looking at like a number three scenario. Um, it'll be because of that. We're in this major crisis point, and they're going to use that as justification to nullify the votes or nullify the election, the results of the election. That'll trigger an investigation, which will drag over for months and months, and we know that that generally is not going to go in Trump's direction necessarily because that never seems to happen that way. There's too much entrenched interest in Washington D.C. and NATO and the EU that don't want him to run or don't want him to win or take power. So you know that'll just go on, and it'll be like all these other investigations that become classified. When the next thing you know, it's been 6 months, we haven't heard anything, and people just tend to forget and move on. I remember, like they just tried to assassinate Trump not even 2 months ago, and it's been completely wiped from the news almost entirely. But let's say that he wins. Now the question remains: do the Democrats actually concede power? Which I have a very very difficult time seeing them concede power, given all the dirty tricks they've played, for the last 9 years against him. For him to come in this time uh, in a very different frame of mind than when he won in 2016. And he's admitted as much. He came in 2016. I think it was much a shock to him as it was to a lot of people that he actually won. But then he had surrounded himself with people that were, he had to put together very quickly a cabinet, uh, uh, and these were people that he'd had dealings with in the past, and had somewhat good relationships with, but they weren't vetted. They weren't. tried and true, tested politically, and how nasty the deep state could get. And this time, I think he's built up a cadre of folks around him that have proven themselves not only loyal to him throughout, through thick and thin, but have proven themselves to be valuable in what they bring to the table. Folks like, um, man, I'm blanking on the guy's name. The guy that was the DIA director that was brought in that basically they threatened to throw him in jail when the FBI entrapped him. Uh, I don't know. He's got plenty of folks now, and not only that, but this time the Republican Party is his party. The last time it was not his party. He was very much the outsider. This time he is the party. And Dan asked, "What's the LLC?" So you have the least likely course of action, most likely course of action, most dangerous course of action. Um, so least likely, like for number one, when I have the election, yes or no. Do I see the economic collapse as a possible scenario? Yeah, but I see that as the least likely course of action. The most likely course of action, it would be some type of attack, maybe some type of major terror attack in conjunction with a major cyber attack against a lot of our infrastructure, whether it's energy, um, networks, internet networks, power grids, all that kind of stuff. That would be incredibly disruptive to the systems. Um, Obviously, the most dangerous courses of action would be a World War III scenario or a true pandemic, where the mortality rate is north of 25 to 50%, somewhere in that neighborhood. But let's say that the Democrats do not concede power. Then I say number five is going to be probably the most likely course of action and also the most dangerous course of action, which would be the declaration of a martial law by the Democrats. They'll find some way to justify declaring martial law, which would then lead to probably some type of fracturing of the nation via civil war or of varying stages of civil war, in different states. So one state it might be more pronounced, another state it be might less pronounced, but throughout it all, I mean, there's going to be basically chaos throughout the states. But if they do concede power to Trump and say, okay, well, we lost, nothing's we're going our way, we've tried to steal the election, it's not working, and their hands are completely tied, and they concede power, then yeah, then Trump assumes power January 19th or whatever, January 20th, inauguration day, and they'll keep up the lawfare attacks, and they're gonna whatever. But now this time, I think he is going to be able to assign people to handle very specific things throughout the entirety of his 4 years. Should the U.S. and should we remain here during that whole time? But he might have J.D. Vance and totally just in charge of the borders. That's all his focus is, and I guarantee you that border will be closed off tighter than a drum. RFK in charge of food across the United States and holding major brands accountable for poisoning, this generation of children, with all the different food coloring dyes and all the different chemicals that they put in that they don't even send to Europe or Canada. Um, I could see him going after that stuff very, very hard. Elon Musk being brought in to be the office of the government efficiency and beginning to lean down the government. I mean, all of the things that he wants to do, I believe, are absolutely necessary, but it's going to be incredibly turbulent because the deep state, the shadow government, these powerful monarchies are not going to go without a fight. And unfortunately, you and I, we are the collateral damage in all of this. We are going to be suffering the consequences. So there may be times when of groceries quadruples. How popular is that going to be for an RFK Jr. to go in and say, Kellogg's, you need to change all of these, you need to take these chemicals out of this cereal because it's poisoning people. It's going to be incredibly disruptive. I mean, it's going to be necessary, and I'm not saying that it's not worth the fight. I'm just saying that uh, it would be an unpopular time to be the incumbent, administration. Nevertheless, this would be his last time to run, and so it would be the last. Take that for what it is, but I tend to think that we're in the window now between 2023 and 2026 for a rapture event, and that's totally predicated on whether our understanding of passages like Hosea 5:15 through 6, the fig tree parable, and numerous other passages that relate to time. If we were understanding these things correctly, then that's how it should play out, and we shouldn't be surprised. But again, I'm not, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know the future. I'm just looking at this from a student of the Bible. I'm looking at this through that lens based off of my background and my understanding of geopolitics and all that. I kind of see this. I kind of see him winning, and I kind of see the rapture happening in that second Trump administration. That's my best case scenario. That's for us. And like I said before in the previous discussion, I have a good life. I have a good job, I have a good family, I have a good house. I mean, all things considered, with aside from Ella's car accident and stuff, generally we're pretty healthy. Um, I shouldn't want the rapture. I should want to live my best life now. But I realize that we live in a fallen world, and my best life now is not even remotely possible under these current conditions. The only life that I can have now is, you know, asked and keeping my eyes focused on Jesus, and trying to do my best for my family to keep everything from spiraling out of control. As all of we're all basically in the same situation, and we try to do what God's called us to do in the time that we have left. So I look at all when I look at when I look at when we talk about the rapture from kind of Amerocentric perspective, don't for the critics of the preacher of rapture, don't think that I'm not. uh, if the rapture doesn't happen tomorrow, or 5 days from now, or 10 days from now, or 10 months from now, or whatever, I mean, I'm going to keep living and keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to keep my blessed hope fixed on the Lord Jesus Christ. But it breaks my heart to think about all the people around the world who are suffering under tremendous persecution. Places like North Korea, Pakistan, India, China, Iran, all throughout the Middle East, Africa, Central Africa is seeing incredible amounts of persecution against Christians. Um, my hope is for them. My hope is that they get delivered, because it's not just going to be Americans getting raptured. It's going to be everybody, every believer anywhere in the world is going to be delivered from this world. So, it's not, the rapture is just not for American Christians. It is for all Christians, wherever they are. And I also believe children under the age of accountability will go up as well. So, all that to say, I still hold to my original prediction that between now and election, it's going to be incredibly dangerous for us here in the United States. Um, keep your head on a swivel, keep your enough food and water on hand, just in case there is a cyber attack and they do shut down the power grids, and you're still going to have to eat, and you're still going to have gas for your car, and you're still going to have to try to survive and live. I'm not saying that between now and the rapture is going to be a walk in the park, even if Trump wins. In fact, I think it'll be quite the opposite. I think it's going to be just as hard, or if not harder, because they are going to fight like the devil against him to prevent him from doing what he thinks he needs to do for the country. And I know that Trump cannot fix this country. I know that JD Vance cannot fix this country. There's no human politician that's going to fix this country. The only fixing of this country is when Christ returns and he establishes his kingdom on the earth, and he is the one that will fix this world, not not anything that we can do. The church can't fix it. Christian institutions can't fix it. Christian media and Christian music can't fix it. The moral majority can't fix this. Making America great again cannot fix this world. I understand all that. I understand that. I just in the time that we have left, and as we're watching things play out, we don't know how much time is going to pass between the election and when the rapture actually takes place. During that time, we're going to have to live under whatever system that is, and it'll either be a Kamala system that she is basically a mouthpiece for the deep state and all these other entities that are controlling them, and they're going to ram this country down, uh, grind it down into the ground as fast and hard as they can because they need the United States out of the way in order for them to bring about this Agenda 2030, for them to bring about this great reset. They are resetting the present world order that is currently Pax Americana, and they're going to reset it to a globalist government system. And it's not even about uh, whether, as an adult Christian, they're going to censor me on YouTube or whatever. Like that to me is a minor thing. It's about what are they going to force down the throats of your children and your relatives and your parents and all the things that they did. What happened in 2020 was a small taste of what will be coming if she takes office. And I think that's a terrifying thought. You know, look at the UK right now. Look how much uh, uh, oppression is happening there. And you rape and knife some kid, name doesn't get mentioned in the paper, your picture doesn't even get mentioned in the paper, and you might get a slap on the wrist and you might get deported, maybe. If that might even be pushing it. But if you're a British patriot, with the shirt, the Union Jack shirt on, and you make a post and you comment about how the system is rigged against you, you're going to jail for like, a year, 2 years, whatever. I mean, it is completely upside down. And this is the post 9/11 world that we live in. This is the world that they said was gonna, we needed to wage this war on terror in order to win, to make the world safer. Well, I'm sorry, the world doesn't feel safer right now. It feels like it's in chaos, and it feels incredibly um, dystopic, Orwellian, and all the other names assigned to what used to be fiction. Okay, we've seen the rise in the resurgence of China and Russia in terms of their aggression against the West and against these plans for the Great Reset and the New World Order. Um, Not the New World Order, the Great Reset and Agenda 2030. They don't want any part of it, and they are pushing back against it. But on the flip side, all they want to do is bring in their own world orders where they're on top and everybody dances to their beat. I think things in Russia and Europe is going to continue to escalate. There's been a number of drone incursions between Russia and Latvia and Russia and Romania and Russia and a couple of other NATO countries, Poland. And, experts aren't sure. They're sure that this is intentional because they're violating their airspace now with these drone flights and even crashing them. I think one crashed into Latvia. I guess maybe they're right now they're trying to gauge what NATO's response would be. But they seem very um, NATO seems and the Biden administration seems very intent on continue to escalate things. And I'm telling you, it would not take much for this to for the world to trip into a World War III scenario, and that's probably what they're trying to do, so they can postpone the elections, forestall a Trump takeover because Trump would kill World War III in day one. He would try to stop it. Hey, sue for peace, whatever. It's not worth going to war over. Um, China's chomping at the bits for Taiwan. I'm hearing rumors now that there's been a silent coup in China where Xi Jinping has been replaced or put under house arrest, or he may be having health crisis issues right now. Um, but one of the things I've seen with the Xi Jinping and his rule for the last, 10, 15, 20 years is that he's systematically gotten rid of everybody that is even remotely um, competition to him. So there's no heir apparent right now. And he has cracked down so hard on the Chinese people that it's triggered something in a generational sense that they haven't seen maybe in over 100 plus years. And it's this phrase, it's called Bai Lin or Bai Lan. I can't remember what it means, but it means let it rot. And the government has cracked down so hard on the younger people that they've completely disincentivized them from trying anything. They don't want a family. They don't want a job. If they're going to do a job, they're going to do the very bare minimum, because there's no incentive to do better, to work harder, to raise kids. Nothing. They can't even afford to buy houses now. And this idea amongst the Chinese youth, this Bailan, let it rot. Think about that. They've just given up. They've given up on their nation. And I thought, well, our country's not that far behind it. I mean, this generation, uh, you've got kids that are getting ready to graduate college that have no hope in HE double hockey sticks of buying a house. They can't even afford to buy a house, much less get married and have kids. I mean, I think I haven't seen the recent. I saw it a few days ago, but something like when Biden took over, you needed to have a income of like 60,000 in order to be able to buy a house and move into the house and work your job, and you need to make about 60,000 a year. Now it's like 110,000. And I can't think of any college kids unless they're coming out as medical students or, doctors or, mechanical engineers or, very specific type of degrees that are going to come out and be able to afford to live anywhere. They can't afford the rent. They can't afford the groceries. They can't afford, I mean, they're definitely not thinking about having kids. Kids are expensive. And trust me, I know. And they can only get more expensive the older they get. So I think our generation has embraced that too. Let it rot. You know, I've seen it here in a small hometown where most of the jobs are minimum wage, and the people that have money, their money is generational money. That's, they've inherited land from their parents, and their parents inherited it from their parents, and so on. So there is a lot of wealth here, but it's not spread even remotely amongst everybody. It's concentrated in the hands of the few. Jenny says, skip college, learn a trade. Yep, that's what I told my kids. All of this global economic instability, though, the high inflation, stagflation, hyperinflation, all of these things that are happening are are by design. It's designed to drive our nation to a point of desperation so that we have no choice but to embrace a central bank digital currency. And if you have, let's just use me for an example, right? I'm Joe Schmo. I don't know much about the world. I'm just working, got my head to the grind and working, paying bills, coming home, trying to stay afloat. And I keep noticing that every time I go to the grocery store, to Walmart to buy groceries, it's always I'm, paying more money for less food, and eventually it's gonna get to a crisis point. And, nationally, it'll become such the crisis, much the way the border has become, that the only solution that the government's gonna come forward with, especially under a Democratic government, would be to embrace a central bank digital currency, and if you don't embrace it, if you don't switch over to this currency, you're not gonna be able to buy anything because your money is basically worthless. Your dollars are worthless. Your, credit cards are worthless. All of these things, whatever anything tied to the old system is gonna be worthless, and the only people that are in the new system, the new central bank digital currency, they're the only ones that are gonna be able to continue to function in society. And that's what it's this is all of this what we're seeing, and that's why Trump is such a threat to that. He's threatening to undo this economic desperation by unleashing American energy, which will then bring down the prices of things because now it doesn't cost a 18-wheeler, a transportation company, it doesn't cost them, the same amount of money to transport that 18-wheeler full of groceries and food and goods and whatever to cities across the United States. And then that will start to bring the prices down and the price at the pump down and everything else will start to level off. And they don't want that. They've got us now, excuse the phrase, by the short and curlies, and they've got us kind of where they want us. And they just need a little bit more time to break the camel's back as it relates to this economic dilemma that we're in. So I feel like that's the post 9/11 world that we've inherited, and that's that is what they're fighting to maintain. They're trying to keep that pressure ramped up on us so that eventually the American society does break. And given the choice between starving or rolling over and accepting this new central bank digital currency, I think most people are going to accept the central bank digital currency because they're not going to really have a choice. It's either starve and have all your power cut off and basically become homeless, or you embrace this new system. And I've been saying this for 10 years already. It's weird to see it though. It's weird to see it all play out the way it has. Anyways, that's very, very depressing. Depressing information to be constantly hit with. Um, but I do want to talk about the good news because I don't want to leave you with just the bad news. And the good news comes in the form of an article that uh, is up today on the website called Escape Artist. This is by John Bellum. And as pre-trib folk, we constantly are being called, all we just want to be escape and we can't deal with this world and blah blah blah. Yeah, that's all garbage. The people that are making the accusations, I would say, are probably living pretty good lives and they're very comfortable where they are. Um, so they don't feel that same level of desperation that many folk do, especially when you have a lot of health crisis going on in your house. You've got family issues going on, maybe a son or a daughter or a sibling who's struggling with drug addiction or who knows what. Um, the fracturing of all the churches in America. I think we're up to over 20,000 different kinds of denominations and churches out there. We don't speak with a single voice anymore as a Christian community. We've been very, very much divided. And as my friend Dan mentioned this morning, you got a town like Houston, Texas, that has more Christians and more churches than you have voters, and yet they still elect a gay mayor who is, progressive leftist. How does that work? It works because we've been divided. We've been divided. That's the whole part and parcel of the communist Marxist agenda, divide and conquer. They divide us. They find ways to divide us, and then they split us apart, and then we no longer come together as a homogenous group, as a voting bloc anymore. Um, and then they are allowed to bring in these progressive Marxist puppets to cities across the United States who begin to basically destroy the city and the structure of the city from the inside out. And then most of your urban centers today are crime zones. They are very incredibly dangerous, filled with crime, drugs, violence. Nobody wants to live in them anymore. So people move out to the suburbs or move out to the country or move to a different state. And then what happens is you begin to empty out all of these places that for decades, dozens of decades have gone, and we've made Detroit the automobile capital of the world, the manufacturing powerhouse of the United States and Michigan. But nobody wants to live in Detroit anymore because it is so terrible. And we basically hollow out these places and we create a bunch of ghost towns everywhere. Little hint from my upcoming short fiction story. But I want to read this for you because I think John does an excellent job here. He says, those who like to deny that a rapture event is coming love to refer to Christians who believe in it as escapist. This would include both the world of lost souls who deny Christ as well as the amillennialist and postmillennialist and preterist and all the others who believe in Jesus but claim we must build the kingdom on earth first before the second coming. They are like those Peter warned us about in his second epistle. Knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts, saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willfully forget that by the word of God the heavens of old were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with the water. But the heavens and the earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and the perdition of ungodly men. The mindset of these pre-mill rapture haters is that we are worthless to society because we aren't helping make the world a better place by conforming to their cultural advancements, and because to the church's growth, because we are not advancing the kingdom fervently due to our supposed defeatist ideology. Now I'm going to stop here for a second. This was kind of the gist of the conversation I had with Lee Brainerd the last time we got together, talking that the left, the political left, and the Christian right both hate the pre-trib rapture. The Christian left they just hate Christianity in general because it's the truth. But the Christian right see us as very much as defeatist, basically giving up on this world, and we're not willing to take a stand. That is equally nonsensical. I am the biggest pre-trib guy in the world, but I've been involved in my school board. I've been involved in the SHAC, which is the school health committee that looks at keeping pornography and things like that out of school curriculum. In fact, I have a meeting coming up here this week. I've done jail ministries in numerous places. I mean, I try to get involved wherever I can, but that doesn't mean I can't still have the blessed hope, centered, in my life that I know that even though I'm trying to forestall the rotting of the culture inside of America, that doesn't mean that I can't also look up and be looking for the Lord to return. And I know I say this all the time, but I can walk and chew gum at the same time. I don't. It's not one or the other. You don't have to have this dichotomous perspective on being pre-trib. If you're pre-trib, you can only be pre-trib, and you can only go out every day on a hill dressed in all white and wait for the Lord to return. And when He doesn't come back that day, you go home and go to sleep, and then the next day you go out and do the same. No, I think none of it. There's probably if that's the way you live your life, please raise your hand. I think most of us here would say that wherever we are, we're involved in our church, we're involved in our communities, we're involved with our families, we're trying to make a difference where we are. But we get this false accusation laid on us, like we can't do both at the same time. Like we can't be looking for the Lord to return, and also we can't be serving our community at the same time. They seem it seems incredulous to these folks that we can't do both. If I said that right, I hope I said that right. Redeeming the time. Yep. Jackie, Chris, not me. The urgency makes more bold than ever. Absolutely, it's made me more bold. I don't care anymore what people think. Um, I'll tell them about Jesus. I'll tell them he's coming soon, and they might look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, all right, well, whatever. You'll find out soon enough, I guess. But I'm going to get busy doing this over here. Let me continue. The antagonists sadly come from both outside and inside the Christian camp, and often the so-called friendly fire from other Christians is even more venomous than from the non-believing world. And that is unfortunate. Now, I will say this. I appreciate more somebody that is openly hostile to the pre-tribulation rapture than somebody that comes in pretending to just ask questions. But they're not really asking questions because they want the answers. They're trying to cause division, or trying to cause confusion inside of a perspective, inside of a group like this. And it feels like if somebody came in here today to the chat and said, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be, they might ask a very basic question. What do you mean that the New Testament doesn't say that there's a new temple built in the New Testament? It doesn't say that anywhere. And then you show them, and they're like, well, I don't. And I went through this whole conversation with this guy, and come to find out he's from like a Reformed theology group. So I'm just like, dude, you're not even being honest. I mean, at least come in here and be honest. Tell me what you believe. And the problem now is that you're seeing within the post-millennial, amillennial, preterist, all these groups, they won't even identify themselves anymore as that particular flavor. They might be a hybrid of things, but essentially they're going to hold to one of those positions: post-mill, amill, or preterist, some flavor of preterist, or maybe preterist and amill, and preterist or post-mill. And they just come in pretending to be asking questions, and then when you challenge them on it, they get all offended about it. I'm like, well, okay, quit coming in here faking it. Like you're really asking, um, that you really want the truth, but in reality, you're in here trolling. That's all you're doing. And I watched a debate not too long ago. The guy was dispensationalist, pastor, incredibly well studied, learned. He has a weird last name. Gepfrich, G-O-E-P, Fritch, something, Pastor Gepfrich. Anyways, he's debating this guy who was a amillennialist professor, some seminary somewhere. And the guy was, not only is he amillennial, but he's also like, you know, trying to popularize the idea that there is no hell. That when you die, God's done with you, period. You're annihilated forever. So he's pushing the whole oh God, what was that guy's name? Rob, whoever he was an annihilationist, basically, that God is going to do away with hell. So people aren't going to be in the lake of fire forever. They, Rob Bell, thank you. He's pushing that same message. And I'm just like, yeah, that is not what the Bible says. And one thing I've noticed about folks that are not pre-trib, and look, I'm not going to defend every pre-trib, because I know there are some folks on the fringe and pre-trib community, but most of the folks that I see that are not pre-trib tend to veer off into extremes of things. So even if you're premillennial, but let's say you're post-trib, I find that those folks veer off into extremes. And there was a guy that I used to debate a long time ago, very well-known guy. He the first interaction I had with him, because I used to spend a lot of time in reformed chat rooms, and I'd come in and say, "Hey, I'm premillennial, pre-trib, dispensational. I'm not even trying to like hide who I am with you guys. I'm not. I'm this. That's who I am. You know, either you accept me in the chat room and we talk and have conversations, which most times they did. But I interacted with this guy for a long time and just back and forth, and then eventually, well, this wasn't a reformed chat room. This was just in a general like Christian chat room kind of thing. But he came out and he was telling me why the pre-trib is not biblical, blah blah blah, and he's just going through all his the usual tropes. And then come to find out this guy didn't even believe in the Trinity. And then later on, come to find out that he's part of the Hebrew roots movement. And then, on and on, it just got worse and worse and worse. The more I learned about this guy, I was like, oh man, he's got all kinds of problems. The pre-trib rapture is the least of your worries, man. You got to get some other things sorted out first. So, but yeah, I think, you know, I know people perhaps these days don't want to label themselves because they don't want to put themselves into a box. But I do find it useful that if you're a preterist, at least say that you are, admit that you are. And if you believe that, own it. If you believe that's what's true, then don't be ashamed. Come out and say it. You know, but quit trying to hide under this guise like you're trying to fit in. Like you're basically the Acts 20. I think it's 27, Acts 20 verse 7, the wolf in sheep clothing kind of guy that comes in and with seductive doctrines and all these other things to steal people away. Um, yeah, Sarah, Hebrew roots is a mess. You know, I wrote an article about that. I don't know if you can find it anywhere. It's called The Cult of Moses. Um, and I wrote that 10 years ago, maybe. It's probably out there somewhere. But yeah, Hebrew roots, any group that basically, and as Chuck Missler used to say, the problem with the real problem that people have in their eschatology is not their ecclesiology. They don't understand who the church is. They don't understand who they are in Christ, and so they begin to confuse their roles and their place in God's order of things based on their human perspectives and human agendas and human biases and all that kind of stuff. And then the pre-trib is just the most obvious um, symptoms. You're right, that you see out there. I'm gonna keep reading. Uh, Now, it is understandable that those outside proper Christendom would believe we are out of our heads, expecting a sudden escape from the planet in the twinkling of an eye. They don't believe in our Lord and his promises, so we should expect them to revile us and reject our hope. I'm going to stop here. One thing I've noticed about people that hate the pre-trib rapture, they bunch together, right? So you might have an amillennial guy and a postmillennial guy come against a pre-trib guy, even though these two guys have still wildly, vastly different views. They still hate the more, right? I'm like, why do you hate that more? Or you might have a preterist and a pre-wrath will come against or a post-trib and a preterist will come against a pre-trib. Like that doesn't. I don't get that. I don't. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, kind of thing. That just makes me believe the pre-trib all the more that these guys with wildly errant views will join together just to attack you. You know, they don't believe in our Lord and his promises that we should expect them to revile us and reject our hope. But those within the true Christendom will adhere to a different eschatology, normally do so because they claim there is no biblical support for our theory. They claim there are no verses that support our position, and that is the creation of John Darby in the late 1800s. I'm not going to go into detail about all the common points we make about verses such as 1 Corinthians 15:52, which says, "Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall all be changed." Or John 11:23-26. Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha saith unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet he shall live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? And Jesus is speaking of the dead who will rise. This is his comment. Jesus is speaking of the dead who will rise at the rapture, and the living who will be translated to an eternal state without dying. Or John 14:2-3. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Or Revelation 3:10. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon the whole world, to try them that dwell upon the earth. Or 1 Thessalonians 5:9-11. For God hath not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain of salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. Wherefore comfort yourselves together, and edify one another, even also as ye do. Or 1 Thessalonians 4:13-18. Brothers and sisters, we don't want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind, who have no hope. Let me stop here real quick. My dad passed on not last January, but the January before. So the January I went to Kentucky, he passed. And my dad's a believer. He wasn't a perfect man by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, my mom will attest to that. But she and I both believe that he was a believer. And I believe that the Holy Spirit was working on him throughout his life. And you could see the conviction of things in him, especially in conversations and things with me, the regret he's had in his life over my relationship with him, or our relationship. And it reminded me of the weightlifting thing. I got a quote here. A young man mockingly said to a preacher, You say that the unsaved people carry a great weight of sin. Frankly, I feel nothing. How heavy is sin? 10 pounds, 50 pounds, 80 pounds, 100 pounds? The preacher thought for a moment and gently replied, If you laid a 400-pound weight on a corpse, would it feel the load? The young man was quick to say, Of course not, it's dead. The preacher replied, The person who doesn't know Christ is equally dead, and though the load is great, he feels none of it. And looking at my dad, I know that he felt conviction in his life about things, and deep regret over a lot of things. So I feel like not only that, but he and I had conversations, Christian nature, and he had a very well understanding of salvation and all that. So I knew he was saved. My whole point with him mentioning this in the first place was that I didn't grieve for him like an unsaved person would grieve for another unsaved person. I grieve for my friend that committed suicide a long time ago, back in 2007, because honestly, I don't think he was saved. I hope he is. I mean, I don't know that 100%. I never ever got that vibe from him. And the one or two times we did have a conversation that even remotely strayed close to God, church, faith, all that kind of stuff, he quickly dovetailed out of that into a different, conversation. So for my dad, I don't feel that same level of grief, because I know I'll see him again. You know, same with my mom if she were to pass, or my sister, or my children, or my wife, or people that I know intimately, that I know that are saved. Would not grieve for them in the same manner that I would. I mean, of course, you grieve for them because they're gone from the here and now, but uh, it's not the end. Death is not the end for us. We will live forever with Christ. I don't know what it is. When I get on camera, my nose itches like crazy. The rest of the day, I won't even touch my nose. The minute I get on camera, it's like, um, where was I? For we believe that the Lord that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him. According to the Lord's word, which we just read in first or John 14, 2 through 3, we tell you that we who are still alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first, or will rise first. After that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will be with the Lord forever. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. And there are many more passages in the New Testament that we can point to as proof of our imminent calling to be with our Lord at the rapture. And those who have discussed by many writers on this site throughout the Watcher community, so I won't hash over those same points here again, although they are tremendous proof of our position. Now, here's where I wanted to get to. Uh, in researching the notion of an escape, I feel God was very generous in giving us Old Testament examples of rapture typologies, escapes that, while not always prefiguring a snatching up of the church, at least symbolize an incredible escape provided by God, that God revealed that revealed God's protection and provision for the safety of his people. Enoch's departure. The first two are pretty obvious. Enoch and Elijah, both men were taken to heaven by God supernaturally without tasting death. Enoch was Noah's grandfather and was snatched up to heaven prior to the great flood. The timing may have been a picture of how God would rapture his church prior to the next worldwide judgment. So the last worldwide judgment, Enoch was taken up. And then this next worldwide judgment, we have the rapture of the church, which is another taking up. Elijah, although Enoch was certainly, I'm skipping over those passages he provides. Although Enoch was certainly a rapture before judgment example for us in the Old Testament, Elijah wasn't so much. His translation to heaven in a whirlwind was not truly an escape, but instead was more of a situation of God choosing a time when people are unaware that snatching away is coming, except for the true watchers. Elijah was taken to heaven in a whirlwind, and his protege, Elisha, and a small group of prophets were following his every move to see what was about to happen. Elijah gave Elisha a sign to look for, and Elisha was faithful to watch and obey. And so we get the passage there in 2 Kings chapter 2, 9 through 14. Elijah is certainly a type of snatching away, but not so much in the escaping the coming wrath style. But there are other examples. Let's look at Noah. Noah and his family, 7 family members, certainly would be considered. They knew judgment was coming, faithfully built the ark, and obeyed all the Lord commanded to be ready. Faithfully, God preserves them in the ark, and the rest of the world perished. Now they are not snatched away. So this example may be more akin to the sealed 144,000 Jews of the Revelation, um, who are protected by God through the Great Tribulation. Many have equated Enoch to the church leaving the earth before the judgment, and the family of Noah being preserved through the flood like the sealed Jews. The order is judgment, and the order is correct as well. Enoch raptured, and then the family of Noah preserved through the flood. The church will be raptured, and the remnant of the Jews will be preserved through the tribulation, and the symmetry is perfect. Lot is another example of someone who was evacuated before judgment when his family and he were escorted out of Sodom before God's destruction fell upon that city. It was not a true rapture parallel because they were not translated to heaven, but it was nonetheless an escape from judgment and shows God's faithfulness to his remnant by removing them before he pours out his judgment. Lot and Noah may have been the two examples Jesus used in his description of his coming, Luke 17, 26 through 30, because Lot escaped the judgment just as the church will, while Noah was preserved through the judgment as the Jews will be one day. Israel cornered. Another great escape was provided as Moses and the Israelites were backed up to the shores of the Red Sea with the hard-charging Egyptian army coming at them in full force to massacre the pinned Hebrews. Only a slaughter appeared possible until God opened the waters and provided an escape route for the Jews and then drowned the Egyptian army behind them. That's in Exodus 14:21 through 29. I see this more as a type of an Old Testament picture of Revelation 12, where the satanic Antichrist is pursuing Israel during the tribulation, and the remnant are led into the wilderness to safely avoid their destruction, but it's certainly an escape provided by God that previews the end times. It shows God's nature as Savior, deliverer, and protector of his chosen ones. Daniel goes missing. And I love this one. One passage I've been somewhat inquisitive about is Daniel 3. It's a surprising to me that although Daniel is present in all the chapters of the book, he is visibly absent and not mentioned in chapter 3. Instead, the entire chapter is about a new form of worship being instituted by the Babylonian kingdom, and Daniel's three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are the focal points of the chapter's controversy. Everyone in the kingdom is ordered to worship the new statue erected by Nebuchadnezzar in his image, and if they don't fall, or if they don't, they will be thrown into the 7 times heated, or thrown into the furnace and killed. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to worship anyone but their God, and consequently were thrown into the fiery blazing furnace that was heated 7 times to die. But instead of being consumed, a fourth person appears who looks like the Son of God and keeps them safe. They survive the ordeal unscathed to God's glory. Now, my interpretation of the typology in this story is that Nebuchadnezzar is a foreshadowing of the Antichrist. The image he sets up to be worshipped is a picture of the image of the beast that the Antichrist and the false prophets set up in the temple of Revelation 13. And the three boys represent the sealed Jews in the tribulation that can't be killed, and the one like the Son of God in the furnace with them is, of course, Jesus Christ, and foreshadows the Jews when they believe on Christ during the tribulation and thus will be saved. Because the chapter fails to even mention Daniel, I believe he may represent the pre-trib believers who are absent from the tribulation because they've already been raptured. I certainly could be wrong about this, but it makes sense in light of the rest of the chapter lining up so well with the book of Revelation, especially chapter 13. Remember, the church age is the entire subject of chapters 2 and 3 of Revelation, but once the command to come up here uh, is given to John at the beginning of chapter 4, the church is completely missing through the entirety of the tribulation period in the next 19 chapters of the book. Daniel's missing during this mini tribulation preview of chapter 3 may represent the same thing. Now, one thing that, when you talk to anybody that's not pre-trib and you mention the fact that the church is not mentioned after Revelation 3, it's mentioned 19 times in the first 3 chapters, and then it's not mentioned again at all. That word ecclesia. They'll say, well, that doesn't mean anything. That's whatever. You can't, that's an argument from silence. True, it is an argument from silence, but it's a very, very obvious one. And I guarantee you, I mean, I would bet 10 paychecks on this. I mean, it's not even worth betting because at this we know that's the way it would be. If the word ecclesia was used anywhere inside of the 70th week on the earth at all, man, that would be their silver bullet. They would use that against us. I mean, that would be their strongest talking point. But because it's not there at all, they completely avoid it, doesn't exist, it never happened, it doesn't mean anything. That's why they don't like that. And I would just add on to what he's had here that there's other correlations of this silence, argument from silence, that seems to complement this one. So the church isn't mentioned after chapter 3 of Revelation being on the earth, or even that word ecclesia is not being used anywhere, where it is used 19 times in the first 3 chapters. Now it's not used at all. There's another argument from silence that can be made aside from Daniel chapter 3. When you look at the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you have the synoptic Gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And the synoptic just means they're very alike in structure and everything. Uh, you have a version of the Olivet Discourse in each of those three. But the last gospel, the Gospel of John, and John was the apostle that Christ loved, and that's mentioned several times in the Gospel of John. There's no Olivet Discourse. Why isn't there an Olivet Discourse? It's in the other three. Why isn't it in this one? Well, instead, you get the what? You get the. I want to hear somebody from the audience write it out. What, instead of the Olivet Discourse, what do we get? The upper room discourse, thank you. The upper room discourse, and Jesus doesn't even reveal the good stuff, if I can say it that way, until Judas leaves. Once Judas is out, then he launches into, John 14, and he's like, you know, "If I'm going away, uh, I'm going away to prepare a place for you, and if I go away, I'll come back, and I'll take you to be where I am." So then the argument that these pre-trib rapture haters have to return to was like, well, Jesus wasn't talking to the church there. He was talking to just those apostles. Well, we didn't see that anywhere in their lives. I mean, most of them were martyred. The only one that wasn't martyred was John himself, and you know, they tried to kill him several times, and then he eventually, as an old man, the Emperor Domitian banished him to the island of Patmos to die, and then Domitian dies the next year, and then he's released from there, and then John dies of natural causes, of old age. He goes on to live for I don't know how long he lives for, but certainly long enough to get the revelation out to all the churches, and a good probably 10 years after. And people that make that argument that John, the upper room discourse can't apply to the or only applies to the apostles. I mean, how much of the rest of the gospels then don't apply to anybody? They just apply to those apostles right then and there. And I'm a big proponent of the seven letters up to the seven churches. I love teaching through them. There's so much in there. I mean, it's just jam packed full of stuff. And when I start the Revelation study, you're going to see that in spades. I mean, there's so much to talk about. But there's the seven letters to the seven churches were not just to those churches. I think when people try to put that perspective on those seven letters or just apply to those first century churches, I think that's incredibly short-sighted and dim-witted, because you're talking about Jesus who spoke the universe into existence, who is omniscient, omnipresent, knows everything. He's only addressing these seven churches in the first century, and that's it. And they weren't even the biggest churches. There was the church of Antioch, the church in Jerusalem, the church in Rome. I mean, there was churches all over the Mediterranean, all over the Roman Empire, and even beyond at that point. So those churches don't get any type of blessing either. So to me, it just seems like it seems incredibly short-sighted to make it only to those seven churches. But rather, we hear at the end of each of those letters, "He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." And in fact, John in chapter 22 is told to hand this out to all the churches, and they make copies and copies of copies and copies. And so the seven churches are relevant for all churches. And I think the reason there's seven and not six or five or 12 or whatever is that seven is the number of completion. And that these churches, because of the order they're put in, would have a prophetic importance to them, right? Because we get Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea in that particular order. We can look back historically and see that over the course of the last 2,000 years, we can see how uh, Christendom has uh, flowed and grown and dwindled and kind of gone through these cycles. We can see those churches represent eras of time of dominance. And there's so many. I'm gonna have to just pull this out because I can't stop now on this. It's gonna make me bust out the chart here. Let me get my good one because I think you guys would really like this. Let's see if this pulls up here. So if you go through my Revelation studies, this is going to be part of what you get. Oh, this is not even the one I want. Here we go. Hmm. Oh yeah, this is the good stuff right here. All right, let me make this big. Man, I have so many. There's so many notes on this thing. It's going to be insane. Okay, let me share screen. I want you guys to notice something. You have here are the orders that the churches are given, right? Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. The green, there's nothing negative said about them. So Philadelphia and Smyrna. And then the red, there is nothing good said about it, that church. And I think the Laodicean is a type of Judas that was escorted out or left before in the upper room discourse. He leaves to go betray Christ. And then Jesus launches into John 14. Well, notice also here too that in the first three churches, you have the ending of those letters, each of the letters, they have the charge, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches, to him who overcomes, blah, blah, blah. But then the last four churches, it's flipped, right? From Thyatira to Laodicea, it's flipped. To him who overcomes, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the church. So I was thinking, why, and I wrestled with this for a long time, why is it reversed like that? Well, then I looked and I noticed that in the first three letters, there's no mention of a great tribulation or escape from the tribulation in these three. But in the last four, there are. Each one of these, there's a mention of this. And even the Laodicean church, when you think about if this is a type of, and I'm not saying this is going to be equal to the 12 apostles because there's only seven churches, but if the spirit of Judas Iscariot is inside of this Laodicean church, who says they're wealthy and they need nothing, but don't realize they're poor, blind, and naked. What are they? They're eating. They're eating supper, and they're about to you know they're eating this last meal. That's what Jesus tells the folks in Laodicea. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. He's not even inside at this point. He who comes, lets me come in and sup with him and dine with him, so and he goes through that whole thing. And that whole passage has been kind of completely misconstrued to be like some positive thing. I think it's a very negative thing here. He's not even in there with them. But anyways, this has uh borne out the first 3 century churches, like the first who say, you tested those who say they're apostles and are not. Obviously, we don't have apostles anymore because apostles would be those people that had physically walked with Christ in his ministry on the earth. That obviously didn't exist beyond John. After John died, he was the last who knew Jesus Christ personally. Smyrna, while we do have persecuted churches around the world, this church here was assigned for 10 specific days of tribulation. And I think that those marry up with the 10 particular Roman emperors who persecuted the church, the infant church, incredibly hard. And then the last one here is Pergamos, where it is the prototype of what would become the Roman Catholic system. And so the Pergamos system doesn't exist anymore. Now it is morphed into this Thyatira system. Now, they all exist in the first century. That's true. They are also in the judgments and things noted to them, but there is also noted, and in one of those becomes Revelation. There's a lot of preterists and folks that want to say that Revelation was written in 65, 66 AD because they got to fit it into the time of Nero, because Nero has to be their Antichrist candidate, right? Well, Smyrna wasn't even a church in the 60s, according to Polycarp, and Polycarp was the bishop of Smyrna. He said there didn't exist a church there while Paul was there. Paul dies in 66, 67, 68, somewhere in there. And then another one was Antipas, who was martyred for his faith. Well, we know historically that Antipas was martyred in 92 AD. He was put inside of a brazen bull, and the bull was superheated, so that Antipas cooked inside of this bull. So that was a historical event. That couldn't have happened under Nero. This happened under Domitian. Um, anyway, so I love going through the seven letters. There's so much to talk about here, and there's so much overlapping with the mystery kingdom parables in Matthew 13, as well as the Pauline epistles, and even the names, even like the promise, for those who overcome will eat from the tree of life. For those who are not hurt by the second death, those who overcome in Samaria will not be hurt by the second death. On and on down to the church in Philadelphia, and the one in here. And I thought, a pillar in the temple of God. That doesn't sound very exciting. I don't want to be just a pillar. But then we think about the phrase like pillar, the pillar of society, like they are the leaders in certain segments of society. They are a pillar of society, like so much depends upon them. And I believe that this is a special recognition of this type of believer. And so I believe that all these last four are all in play right now. They all overlap each other right now. And it's kind of like the wheat and the tares kind of thing. And I'm not saying that everybody that is inside of a Philadelphian type church is saved. Just because they go to the church there doesn't make them saved. Just like sitting in your garage in a chair doesn't make you a car. You have to be born again. I mean, that's the obvious thing. But those that are born again inside of these type of congregation and groups and remnant bodies of believers, that God is going to put on a special place for them. And that also ties into the other hard sayings that are in these passages, like the synagogue of Satan and those who say they are Jews. I'll go into all of that stuff when I actually start this study. But anyways, I'm really passionate about the seven letters. Um, I think there's so much there. That's Christ's last message to the churches. Anyways, I rabbit trail and go on to so many different things. I apologize for that. Okay, where were we? Had so many things open now. And then here, John, he continues all the way down, but I want to end with this passage. So when you get called an escapist, you should have this verse burned in your memory. Just know to go there. This is Jesus saying, "Watch therefore and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass and to stand before the Son of Man." Luke 21:36. Pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape. Folks, we are not long for this world. I tell you right now, there is so much convergence, so many things coming together so rapidly that there is no way that this continues on and on just for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We will have destroyed ourselves as a globe, as a world. We will have destroyed ourselves many times over before that could happen. And there's so many red lines that are happening that we cross. Once you cross over these things, you can't undo them. You can't uninvent AI. It's out there. It's now. It's part of our fabric of reality that we have to deal with. You can't uninvent the nuclear weapon. You can't uninvent the bullet. I mean, on and on. I mean, we are past so many different points of no return now that we're running out of time. And just looking at today, or I think yesterday, recognizing that, man, September 11th is Wednesday. Like it had creeped up on me this year. I didn't even think about it. Maybe not creeped up on everybody else, but it crept up on me. very quickly because I became so consumed with things that I had to do in the normal daily life, family, work, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, that's my message today. I hopefully that you guys are encouraged by it. Um, I want to go to the Q&A section now. Let's see, where am I? Thank you, Sarah, for collecting all these. Okay, from Allison, ask, is AI now in control of the internet? Uh, it certainly seems that way because every new laptop I'm seeing is coming with its own prepackaged AI. Every new search engine now is offering its own AI services. Um, maybe with the exception of like DuckDuckGo and some of these other, privacy-based ones, but Bing, Google, the rest of them, they've all incorporated AI into it. So AI is being incorporated into everything. I don't think that it's singularly controlling the internet right now, though, not like a Skynet kind of thing, because I think the internet systems that we have are still completely disparate from each other, still kind of segregated right now. The right crisis will come along, and all of those systems will be rolled up into one. And that may be Starlink, I mean, for all we know, because once he gets all of these satellites into space and they blanketed the Earth with coverage everywhere, then it's one operating system that can be ran through all these different satellites that then becomes the one that controls it all, like the rings, the one ring that controls all the other rings. Kathleen McKeithen, question: if the rapture happens when things are normal, I wonder about the things we are looking at with the upcoming election time. Yeah, I've also wrestled with that too because Luke 17 seems to indicate that it will be a time of normalcy. People will buying and selling, eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, planting and sowing, etc. Um, I think Lee Brainerd is of the opinion that this could be inside of the tribulation. I don't see it that way. I think he and I would disagree on that point because I don't see how anything inside of the tribulation is going to be normal. Even in the first 3.5 years, it's not going to be normal. I mean, the second the rapture happens, the supernatural is going to flood back into the world again in a way that we haven't seen since before the flood. No pun intended on that. Um, I don't know. So for me, how this works out, I think if Kamala wins through fraud, deception, whatever, the deep state puts her in power, I don't see that as being normal either because I think she is driving us to destroy this nation, and they have to collapse this nation in order to bring about this system that they want. But if they collapse the United States, that's going to have that ripple effect across the world where all the other nations are also going to be suffering under varying stages of collapse and chaos and whatnot. So I think Trump winning is the best case scenario for that because if he wins and day one he lowers energy prices, open up fracking, the Canadian pipeline, all that stuff begins to have all the ramifications of things coming back, walking the world back from the edge of the cliff, right? And it may also signal to Trudeau in Canada and McKiernan in the UK and I don't know who the prime minister is in Australia right now, but these other kind of pro-Western allied nations that Trump's not going to put up with their garbage. So they may scale back how much totalitarianism they are currently trying to implement. So that's for me. That's why I think Trump to me represents that kind of. I mean, that's part of this rolled up in why I think he also is, A, going to win, and but B, makes a strong case for the rapture happening during his second administration. Certainly, I don't think normal could exist beyond 2030 because, I mean, that the whole world is wanting to go into this great reset time period. KG, uh, what would you speculate would be written on the back of the book of seals mentioned in Revelation 5:1? Now, I kinda just go with the standard thing, and it's the title deed to the earth, and maybe not just the earth, but creation, humanity, the universe, everything, and maybe the title deed of everything. Um, my mom asked a question, "Should we stock up on groceries and supplies in case of war?" I would, stock up on groceries, water, essentials between now and election because, I mean, I'm hearing from all sorts of sources that they are expecting a major cyber attack, energy grids going down, that kind of stuff. And if they haven't stopped Trump and they can't stop him through lawfare, which I just found out they postponed his sentencing till after the election. If they can't stop him through lawfare, if they can't stop him through these criminal trials, if they can't stop him through the traditional means that they have, and they can't stop him through assassination. I think the only option they have left is these big crisis events where they either postpone the election altogether or they don't concede power if he wins. So Coco says, I have a lot of sardines. If I only had sardines to eat, I would probably starve to death. I am not a big fan of sardines. Um, so yeah, I mean, but you know what? It never hurts to have extra food and water on hand. And I'm not saying go out and get the Patriot bundle for $600 where you've got like MREs for the next 20 years. You don't have to do all that, but I mean, have plenty of canned goods that don't expire if the power goes out. I mean, you need to have food that you can eat. I mean, honestly, like you could even have dog food, cat food. I mean, if you're hungry enough, you're going to eat that stuff. I mean, you think about the Donner Party that were crossing into the Sierra Nevadas in the 1800s. I mean, when they got trapped there in the mountains, they got down to eating like leather belts, leather shoes. I mean, they had already eaten, slaughtered their horses. Anything that had leather, they were eating it. Um, excuse me. Hunger is the best seasoning. All right, that's right, Diane. Rice. I mean, yeah, anything that you can keep dry goods stored, accessible, have access to drinking water. If you have your own well, that's even better. But I mean, if you're in a city or a suburb or someplace where you're dependent on the system to provide water to you, I would have some way to have clean drinking water. Sure. Batteries. Have a lot of extra batteries. Have a radio. Do we have anybody that does ham radios in the audience? If you do, if you have ham radios or you're really good at ham radio stuff, email me. I have some questions for you. Colleen Cardwell, question. Okay, two okay churches, Philadelphia and Smyrna. Might some Christians might some Christians be imprisoned for 10 days, Smyrna, prior to the rapture? No, I think honestly, I think that 10 days and that specific message was to that first um the anti-Nicene churches there. Because clearly Smyrna wasn't the only church that was persecuted for 10 days. I mean, there was when these emperors came about, um, beginning with Domitian, or you could begin it at Nero, but really Nero was mostly localized in his persecution for those in and around Rome itself, whereas Domitian, his persecution was more widespread across the empire. But certainly other emperors, Marcus Aurelius, Diocletian, I don't remember the rest of them, but there's these 10 that really cracked down on the church, the early church. Do I think Christians now are being persecuted and imprisoned. I mean, in the UK and in Africa and India, they're being killed and I mean, Christian persecution is going on like crazy all around the world. We're in a tiny little bubble in the United States. Primarily, well, besides God, obviously, but primarily because of our Constitution and the way it's written, and the Bill of Rights in there, and so in the checks and balances in the governments, we're the only government that has that kind of structure. And because we have that kind of structure, it's prevented them from doing what they would have been doing for the last 30, 40 years. They would have already been doing it, but they can't without collapsing the entire system down. So we just fortunate enough to be in this kind of catch 22 when it comes to Christian persecution in the world. I mean, Americans are no better. Well, I'm not any better than Christian in India or North Korea or anywhere else. It's just the way the system is that we live under, you know? Let's see. Angel, do you think we will know just prior that it's coming or not until the rapture? I kind of think I used to think that we wouldn't know at all, but then that my views changed over the years on that. I do think we'll see it coming, and I do think we're not going to know the day or the hour, but I think we should collectively sense it. Okay. Texas two-step and glamping Yorkies. Wow, that's a title there. Uh, do you think that most non pre-tribbers believe they have to do works to make it? Well, I would say that depends, right? Your Reformed theology camp, no, because of their beliefs in predestination and Calvinism and all that other stuff. Salvation by grace through faith. I mean, they're pretty big on that. But when you look at groups that believe that the church has to go into the tribulation, like pre-wrath and post-trib and mid-trib, partial trib. I think that they are very much based on works, and are very much I don't want to say holiness-based groups, but there's a spectrum within those groups themselves of like, on one side, you might have lordship salvation types. You're not really saved unless you are always, marching that direction. And the other side, you might have even further extremes like Hebrew roots or whatever. If you're not keeping the Jewish feast as a Christian, then you're not going to make it. Or I don't know. I've heard it all, but it's a spectrum in there. But I would think within, say, even amillennial and postmillennial, who are within the reformed side of it, would say no, salvation is by grace through faith. They're very, very big on that, but they get other things wrong too, talking about the Calvinism and tulip and all that. James Green, pets. What about all of the missing children sacrifices? Pets. What about all the missing children sacrifices? So I don't think pets are raptured, unfortunately. Um, but I do think we will see them again in the kingdom age. I think that we can have them again. I could be wrong. They could be taken up, or let's say you live in an apartment and you have a parakeet and you live alone, and it's just you and your bird, and your bird cage is normally closed, and the rapture happens, and it may just happen on that particular moment in time where you have the cage open and you're like changing the bird paper out and windows open at the same time. I do think that God can make ways for these pets to escape from the house or the cage they're in or from whatever the scenario they're in. I don't know that they will survive the tribulation itself. I doubt it very seriously, given the the types of judgments that are going to be coming upon the earth. And there's nothing in Scripture to say that they are preserved. Um, but I also know that God understands these relationships that many of these pets have come to become, for especially older folks who kids are grown, often married, and their pet becomes their companion for years. You don't think God is sensitive to that? I 100% believe that I mean, that's why he created them. I mean, why, they are created for companionship. If our pets, in my opinion, if our pets were never meant to be pets, they would be like reptiles. I mean, like, you can have a lizard for all of your life, and I'm not an expert on lizards, so I don't really know, but, snakes, lizards, etcetera, turtles, they're not that's not the same kind of companionship they have with you that a dog would have, or a cat, or some other type of mammal. Um, the children will be missing from around the world, absolutely, I believe that. Um, I don't believe that it's just children of Christians, I think it's children of everybody, because those children are still under a particular age of accountability, not any fault of their own, and if they were to grow up inside of that 7-year tribulation time period, the 70th week of Daniel, and they took the mark of the beast prior to the age of accountability, how could I mean, how could a perfectly just and perfectly, just God justify sending a child to hell for taking the mark of the beast, not even understanding because their brain's not even fully developed? There's just a lot of scenarios in there that don't make any kind of sense. That's like saying, "Can God make a rock so big that he can't lift it?" That's that same kind of argument to me. So I think they're taken out of the equation altogether. Now, children will be born inside of the 70th week. We see that in Matthew 24, but those are infants. They're still nursing. I mean, that's the oldest that we see. So at some point inside of the tribulation, children will be born, but they are not going to be there. I mean, they're safely under the age of accountability. And my phone is blowing up. Sacrifices. I'm not sure what you mean by sacrifices. Are are you talking about the Jews going back to the temple sacrifices? I don't know. Maybe you can clarify that question. Let's see. Hey, Tyler, I got yours. Val Halloran question: If one John, First John, John said the Antichrist will come, and it is believed that John wrote it in the 90s. How can preterists believe AC was the Antichrist was Nero, who died in 68 AD? When, yeah, they have no logic. There's no logic in preterism. I mean, you really have to even taking Nero as the Antichrist. Let's just use him as an example. The dude committed suicide, so automatically he cannot be the Antichrist because in Second Thessalonians 2 and Revelation 19, the Antichrist is killed in a very specific way. Not killed. He doesn't die. He's thrown alive into the lake of fire by Christ himself. So how can Nero be the Antichrist if he's committed suicide in 68 AD? It can't be, according to the Bible. But they don't care about that because facts don't mean anything to preterists. They just whatever. They're just going to make it up. Whatever they want it to say, they're going to make it. Try and cram it in there. And that's the same frustration you get when you talk with them about hard facts of why all of this, the second coming and all of that, especially a full preterist, you can't fit that into 70 AD or the time leading up to 70 AD without doing huge damage to the interpretation of scripture in and of itself. And then at that point, since you're doing so much damage, you could just make it say whatever, whatever. I don't, yeah. Preterism has a whole laundry list of problems. David, question: what is your opinion on 2000 so-called evangelicals for? Yeah, they're not evangelicals. Name only, maybe. No, they're social justice gospel warriors. I doubt any of them are even Christian. Diane, question: I am seeing on X a segment of Christian nationalism is criminalizing Churchill while elevating Hitler as moral. Revising much history as good as now bad and bad good. Your thoughts? Um, I don't see that. I don't maybe I'm not looking at it. I don't know. I don't see it. I'm not on X a lot either though. And look, I love Churchill. I mean, I think he was an amazing speaker. He was had amazing mind and leader at the right time at the right place. But he did some bad things too. Let's not completely whitewash his. He was involved in the betrayal of the Balfour Declaration, and he was the guy that first really came up with the idea of unifying all of Europe together. And this was into the 1940s, and he was into that they wouldn't have wars if they were all, one big super state. So he's had some bad ideas and done some damage to Israel. I think he is the one that divided Israel between the land that they were supposed to be getting, and then he kind of cut that in half. So everything east of the Jordan was, or west of the Jordan was Israel, and everything east of it was he was appeasing the Hussein family there in Saudi Arabia. Okay, thank you, Sarah. Somebody had asked a question. I caught it on there, and it was just like, when am I starting the Revelation studies? I don't know. Yeah. I'm waiting on my orders now to go. So if I get those today, I thought it's already been approved. I know that, but like I haven't heard when I'm actually going. So I'm some at some point this week. But whenever I get there, get set up, I'll probably start it that night because I mean we're talking about 22 chapters to get through, and I realize not everybody's going to make every single one, and but they will be saved in my playlist so that you can just go back, and if you missed one, you can just always go back and watch it. And I reckon that each one of these studies will probably be an hour and a half each chapter, maybe 2 hours, but maybe not that long. We'll see. I want to start it soon though. They're pretty much ready to go. I'm just fleshing out all the rest of the notes on all the other stuff. So I might, if I could, I might have a guest on a couple of those chapters on some of the more difficult ones. There's a couple of guys I have in mind that I think would speak really well to some of these issues because I liked how they did theirs. But mostly I foresee it just being myself doing it. But let's read through the comments now. Melody, we will be in your Revelation teaching in Jesus. I hope that would be awesome. Something about Venezuela. Where was that? Oh, yeah. Look, I mean, right now, it's not even just the United States. I mean, I feel like if things don't change very soon with Trump coming back in, and again, not to save, not to fix everything or whatever, but just the perception of him coming back into power, the UK will go through some kind of civil war. I mean, that's very, very likely. Same thing in Brazil. Venezuela just had this, they almost had one. I mean, they just had this really garbage mock trial where Madero lost, but still in power. So there's so much turmoil, and I feel like it's all being ramped up just to get us to the point of desperation where the world cries out for somebody to come save them. And that somebody, I believe, will be the Antichrist. So it's not just in the United States; it's all over right now. And I know in the UK or in Australia, um, there's some crazy stuff going on in Australia. My friend Dan sent me a message there, talking about some new. What is it? Some new digital ID they have to do now. Yes. UN United Nations personnel have complete immunity if they come knocking on your door with a syringe or AK-47. That was in August. Uh, if UN If UN troops appear at your door, you had better go passively into the night, as our 1995 Criminal Code Act, recently amended, is full of severe penalties or for offenses against United Nations officers if there is a good reason for it, like our demise. It's been amended as of August 1st, 2024. Yeah, I mean, the UN is implementing the digital ID system. It's all this stuff is coming in, and you know, Trump is the only kind of leader, human leader right now in the present time that we're in, that could put a kibosh to any of that, or delay it a little bit, until the rapture. But all right, guys, I'm losing my voice at this point. Um, Jay Azuna, I see your question. Was there a pre-Adam world with some kind of life form? No, I don't think there was. Because if God had to destroy that world before, then sin would have entered then, and not with Adam. Certainly, Lucifer was the first, first sinner in that sense. But like, I've, I like to think about ancient cultures and societies, and even the pre-flood world and what that might have been like. And um, you listen to different shows or whatever; they're all talking about younger Adrias, and that happened 10,000 years ago. And then pre-civilizations, they're using these um, carbon dating and all that kind of stuff to say that, oh no, this culture has been around, like the Göbekli Tepe ruin sites there in Turkey are supposedly 10 to 12,000 years old. And you're thinking about, how can that be that old if the world's only not even 6,000 years old? Honestly, I think these guys are just throwing numbers out there. Göbekli Tepe and Baalbek and a lot of these other megalithic structures and sites, um, either right before or right after the flood time period, in my opinion. And that everything before the flood that was so washed away, and the topography of the earth is so upturned because of the continents shifting and moving around, and the water being released, and things that were high now are low, and vice versa. It's almost impossible to gauge before the flood how old the world is, because of the amount of destruction that happened. I mean, you got to imagine Noah and his family get on the ark, and the world looks like one way. Then they spend nearly a year on the ark, and then finally the ark rests on Mount Ararat, or the mountains of Ararat, and they land, and the world looks completely different. Um, I would imagine that there's no way we couldn't be confused on it. I mean, there's just been so much turmoil and upheaval um, in that catastrophe. The deluge was so catastrophist to the United States, or not the United States, to the world. Uh, there's no way to get a real sense of it. We just have scripture to go off of. And even with scripture, we're looking at genealogies and adding up from this guy was born here, died here, and he had a son, he lived here, and we're taking, at that point, we're kind of rounding things off, because somebody didn't die the same day that they were born. There's always going to be an overlapping of time or whatever. So when you factor all of that other stuff into it, we're nearly at the 6,000 year mark of um, creation, and we're coming up very quickly on the 2000th anniversary of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. Just like Tyler and I did the Final Four, that was kind of what that was based off of. And I've, like I said then, and I'd say it again, like, I've always held to like the mid 2020s as the rapture time, and then the mid 2030s at some point being the second coming. So I've shrunk down my gap between the rapture and the second coming. I don't think it has to be as long as I used to think it was, because I think of how far we've progressed and how fast we've moved into things like COVID. COVID sped up the world, digitally speaking, by 6 years. So things like that happening speeds things up as well. So we're further into the time of the end than probably were COVID not to have happened. Um, yeah, we wouldn't even be as far ahead at that point, you know, speaking technologically. And again, I don't think, speaking of X, I don't think that Elon Musk is the Antichrist, but he sure seems like he might be one of the 10 kings. I am. Most preterists won't accept 90 AD writing of, yeah, they won't. And they are rejecting reality, rejecting history, they are rejecting biblical history to embrace this view that is completely asinine. It doesn't make any sense at all. And look, you and I can disagree on whether you think we landed on the moon or not, or whether you think the world is flat or round, a sphere, whatever. I don't necessarily get into those types of arguments, but 90 AD, there's no way Revelation was written before 95 AD. Sarah says the gap is shrinking. Impox will be worse. Yeah, maybe. Tacos soon. Yes. And I invite everybody, all of my 310 tribe, you guys will all be welcome to my house for breakfast tacos, the best you've ever had in the entire universe. Will be in the kingdom age. We can do that every Monday, have tacos. And the thing is, you can eat as many as you want and you won't gain a pound. You won't have the love handles. You won't have upset stomach. You won't have to worry about digestion problems. Nothing, man. You can just eat as many as you want. Super hot salsa. That's right. Some of the times I wish I could just be in the chat. So like I could next time maybe I can pre-record it and just hang out in the chat the whole time. But thank you guys for hanging out today. It's 2:30. I'm gonna have to do the kid run here in a little bit. Man, it's been a crazy day already. I worked out, dropped the kids off for school, went and hit the gym, came back, loaded the trailer up, took the trailer to the dump, unloaded all that, took the trailer to my friend's house, dropped that off, came back, and literally just jumped in the shower, jumped and then boom. This is all that time I had for. But I was up pretty late working on making sure all my notes and stuff are ready. So I go to bed pretty late. Um, hey, just for everybody's essay, Barry Scarborough is starting a Sunday meeting. I think I posted on Telegram. I know Tyler has, Chooch has, and stuff. But he was going to do it Sunday, and then his internet just throttled down or something. Like he was having severe issues with his internet. So Satan does not want him starting that. Pete's Kingdom Tacos, man, I love that. I'm gonna totally steal that from you, Angel. But yeah, so plan on Sundays, Barry Scarborough being back on. So I'm super excited about that. And then I'll be on with him at some point and or have him on here, whichever works easier for him. So again, I'll probably post it in Telegram, but whatever day I end up actually leaving, that next Monday at the latest, the Mondays will be my Monday nights will now be my new Mondays time frame, just like it used to be. And then so as long as I'm living in a hotel room, it'll be Monday nights. And then when I'm back home, it'll be back to Monday afternoons or Tuesday, whatever day, Monday, Tuesday, whatever day works, but it'll be in the afternoon or like noonish time period. So yes, t-shirts, Pete's Kingdom Tacos. Love it. I, I don't think of myself as very much Mexican because I'm half Mexican, but I don't speak Spanish and I don't carry myself like that, but I do a lot of Mexican things. And my wife is always like I knock on countertops with my fist. That's a very Mexican thing. And I just do it. I don't know why I do it. I just do it. Um, all sorts of Mexican food, man. I don't know. I just I love barbecue too. Really good barbecue. Valerie, I'll be in Northwest Arkansas. It's the plan right now. So if you're in the Northwest Arkansas area, I'm just really looking to meet up, been doing Bible studies there, where I'm at, finding a good church in the area. That's really all I'm kind of looking for is just a good church and good places to do Bible studies. So if you're in that area, if it's close to you, man, we'll hang out, do Bible studies, do whatever. Bubba, Northwest Arkansas, not NAR. Yep, definitely not NAR. They would run me out of there on a pole, man. They would not let me be in there. All right, guys. Check out John's article, excellent article, escape artist. And then I have Arnold Miller's got a really great article coming out Wednesday called The Fullness of Time. Wednesday is 9/11. Make sure you take some time to reflect on where we've come as a nation since then. And for those who have lost family members, and that to me is not a time to bring out all the conspiratorial stuff. Hey, I have a lot of questions about 9/11, tons. I have a hard time with the Pentagon thing. Like, I just don't see how that's, from an aviator standpoint, I don't see how it's possible. But that's not the day to do it, because there are still people that have lost family members and you know um, all that. But pray for you guys. Pray for me. Thank you guys for the support, the prayer, love, sweat and tears, all of that. Short stories will keep coming out. As much as I can make free, I will make free to all of you guys through my website. And I think that's it. So thank you, moderators. Thank you, Coco, Sarah, Diane. Uh, I think there was some super chats. Yeah, I'm really bad at that. I'm sorry. The super chat stuff's very new to me. If you gave me a super chat, thank you. I appreciate it. I didn't even catch who did it. But thank you guys. Love you. God bless you. And we'll talk to you soon.